The mockery of humanity. The Galactic Council chamber stretched wide like a cathedral of stars. Its ceiling was carved glass that showed the endless void above, dotted with ships slowly drifting in orbit. Across the curved seats, dozens of alien leaders gathered, their robes glowing faintly in the blue light of the chamber. Voices rose in sharp tones, laughter rippled through the air, and every word carried the same message. Humans were weak. Captain Elias Ward stood near the far edge, dressed in Earth's dark navy uniform. The simple emblem of the Terran Republic gleamed on his shoulder, but in this place it looked small, almost pitiful against the grandeur of alien banners. Elias kept his arms behind his back, his face calm, but his eyes never stopped watching. "They cry when they lose a battle," one alien said, his voice deep and mocking. His skin was plated like iron, his arms as thick as steel beams. They drown in sadness and waste time with grief. Another, a tall creature with glassy skin that shimmered with strange colors, added, "Yes, and when they love, they are reckless. When they fear, they panic. When they rage, they lose control. How can such a race ever stand among us?" The chamber filled with laughter, sharp, cruel, echoing through the glass walls. Elias's jaw tightened. He said nothing. "They are ruled by feelings," another counselor declared. "Passion instead of logic, emotion instead of order. They burn hot but quickly fade. Fragile flames," another alien said with a smile. "Easy to snuff out." The laughter rose again like knives scraping against stone. Elias kept still, but inside, his heart pounded. He remembered the battles of Earth's past. He remembered soldiers holding the line not because of orders but because of loyalty to their friends. He remembered families who rebuilt cities after war, not out of cold duty but out of love. And he remembered the tears of grief that gave rise to strength instead of weakness. But he stayed silent. He knew this was not the moment to speak. The council's leader, a towering figure with horns curling like black blades, lifted a hand. The chamber quieted instantly. His voice was deep and heavy, carrying absolute authority. "Humans have been admitted into this council only by pity," he said. "They are small in number, their fleets weak, their worlds young. They do not belong here. And I say this, when the great wars of the future come, it will not be their weapons that fail them. It will be their emotions. For emotions are chains." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Many nodded, their eyes glowing with satisfaction. Elias stood frozen, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. He wanted to speak, to shout that they were wrong, to remind them of what humanity had endured. But he saw the smirks, the sneers, the dismissive looks. Words would not matter here, not yet. From across the chamber a voice called out, "Do humans deny this? Let their representative speak." All eyes turned. The blue light of the chamber fell on Elias, sharpening every detail of his face. The silence was crushing, heavier than any weapon. Elias stepped forward slowly. His boots echoed against the polished floor. He looked up at the council, at the dozens of alien leaders who stared down at him like hunters studying prey. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then quietly, almost too soft for the chamber to hear, he whispered, to himself, "They'll see what emotions can do. It wasn't meant for them. It wasn't meant for the record. It was meant for him, for Earth, for the people who had carried fire in their hearts when the galaxy thought they would break." But his words did not vanish. They lingered in the air, soft yet sharp, like a seed falling into soil. A few aliens shifted uneasily as if the whisper carried something they could not name. Others smirked, thinking it was desperation. But Elias's eyes told a different story. His gaze was calm, steady, burning with quiet promise. The council moved on, the debates resuming, the laughter rising again. But Elias turned and walked out of the chamber, each step echoing with silent fury. Outside, in the cold corridors of the station, he finally allowed himself a slow breath. His reflection stared back at him from the glass wall. Tired eyes, RE, Hardened face, a man carrying the weight of an entire people. They think emotions make us weak, he murmured, his voice steadier now. But emotions, they make us unstoppable. His whisper faded into the hum of the station, but the fire inside him did not fade. It grew. And deep in the silence of space, a storm was waiting to be born. The silent resolve, the council chambers. Laughter still echoed in Captain Elias Ward's ears as he left the hall. The tall doors closed behind him with a heavy thud, sealing away the voices of those who mocked his people. He walked alone through the long glass corridor of the station, the stars beyond shining cold and distant. His reflection moved beside. Him in the glass, a man small compared to the endless void. But his thoughts were not small. They burned. Elias had seen war. He had seen men and women fight with broken weapons, their eyes full of grief but their hands refusing to let go. He had seen mothers rebuild homes with trembling fingers after bombs turned cities into dust. He had seen soldiers stand in front of fire, not because of orders, but because they couldn't leave their friends behind. The council could call those things weakness. Elias knew better. When he reached the docking bay, he found his crew waiting. A dozen humans stood in uniform, tired and tense. They had heard the rumors. Whispers of what was said in the chamber were already spreading like wildfire through the station. Some looked angry, others ashamed. One of them, Lieutenant Harper, stepped forward. "Captain, is it true? Did they call us weak again?" Elias paused. He looked at their faces. Faces young, scarred, hopeful, afraid. He nodded once. "They said we're too emotional," he answered. "That our hearts make us fragile." The crew muttered among themselves, voices sharp with anger. Harper clenched his fists. "They don't understand us. They've never understood us." "No," Elias said firmly, his voice cutting through the noise. "And they won't, until we show them." The room grew quiet. Every eye turned to him. "We can't argue with them," he continued. "We can't beg them to respect us. Words won't change their minds, but our actions can. Our resolve can. The same emotions they laugh at, our grief, our anger, our love, they will become the fire that drives us. That's how we prove ourselves." Silence followed, heavy and sharp. Then Harper nodded slowly, his voice steady. "So, what do we do?" Before Elias could answer, an alarm blared across the bay. A red light flashed against the steel walls. A voice cracked through the comm system. "Distress call received. Outer colony under attack." The humans froze. Attacks were not unusual in this part of the galaxy. Pirates, warlords, and rogue fleets struck often at colonies that lacked strong defenses. But every time the council responded too slowly, too cautiously, too coldly. The aliens would call for patience. They would hold meetings. They would debate. By the time they decided, the colony would already be ash and smoke. Elias turned sharply to the screen that displayed the incoming signal. Static filled the room, but the broken message was clear enough. "Under fire. Civilians in danger. Need help immediately." Harper's eyes widened. "The council will delay. They always delay." "Yes," Elias said. His voice was calm, but inside his heart pounded like thunder. "They will sit in their chamber and discuss while people die." The crew looked at him, waiting, tense, ready. Elias made his choice. "We're not waiting for permission," he said. The words hit the air like a spark in dry wood. Some gasped, others straightened, fire lighting in their eyes. "Captain," Harper said carefully, "if we move without orders." Elias cut him off. "If we wait, we betray who we are. The council thinks emotions make us weak. Let's prove them wrong. We fight because we care. Because every life matters to us, that is our strength." The silence broke. His words spread through the crew like fire. Backs straightened, jaws tightened, hands clenched. They were ready. Elias turned toward the hangar doors. Outside, their small fleet waited. Ships old, patched, weaker than most council warships. But those ships were theirs. And they would fly. "Prepare the fleet," Elias commanded. "We answer the call." His crew saluted, their faces burning with determination. The hangar filled with the roar of engines powering up, the hum of weapons, charging, the steady rhythm of footsteps as humans took their stations. Elias walked toward his ship, the Resolute. The name felt right now more than ever. He placed his hand on the hull as he passed, whispering, "Let's show them." As the hangar shield opened, the stars stretched wide before them. The human fleet rose into the void, engines blazing against the dark. In the council chamber far behind them, aliens laughed and debated, mocking human fragility. But out here, among the stars, Elias and his crew were moving. Their silence was over. The galaxy had called them weak. Now, with fire in their hearts, they would prove themselves unstoppable. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, an enemy was waiting. The flame ignites. The human fleet broke free from the station and entered the dark stretch of space beyond. Engines flared like blue comets, pushing their ships toward the coordinates of the distress signal. Captain Elias Ward sat in the command chair of the Resolute, his jaw firm, his eyes locked on the endless black. Around him, the bridge hummed with controlled chaos, officers speaking quickly, screens flashing with warnings, weapons charging. "Captain," Harper called from the TU sensor station, "we're approaching the colony." The holographic display lit up. A small planet appeared, ringed with fire. Above it, enemy ships circled like vultures, sleek raiders painted in black and crimson. Already parts of the colony below burned, streaks of smoke rising into the atmosphere. Elias felt his chest tighten. This wasn't just strategy or politics. These were families, workers, children, lives. "Status of the colony?" he asked. "Shields failing," Harper replied grimly. "If we wait, they won't survive." Elias rose to his feet. His voice carried across the bridge, steady and sharp. "Signal the fleet. All ships. Combat formation." The order echoed across comms. The small human fleet tightened, ships moving, together like parts of one body. They were fewer, weaker, outgunned. But Elias saw no fear in their movements. Every pilot, every soldier, carried fire inside. The enemy noticed. Raiders broke from orbit and turned to face them, weapons glowing red. The battle was coming fast. "Captain," one officer said nervously, "they outnumber us 3-1. Elias's voice cut through the tension. "They think emotions make us weak. Show them what happens when we fight for more than ourselves." The fleet surged forward. The first shots lit the void, beams of energy slicing through the dark. Explosions bloomed like red flowers in space. The human fleet scattered, dodging fire, then regrouped, striking back with perfect timing. Inside the Resolute, the deck shook violently. Sparks burst from a console as enemy fire scraped past their shields. But Elias didn't flinch. "Target the lead raider," he ordered. "Hit them hard." Cannons roared, and the Resolute's guns spat fire. The lead raider shuddered under the barrage, its hull cracking, then burst apart in a ball of flame. The crew erupted in cheers, but Elias lifted his hand. "Focus," he said. "This fight isn't over." The enemy pressed harder. More raiders descended, firing relentlessly. One human ship took a direct hit and spun out of formation, its engines trailing smoke. For a moment, fear rippled through the fleet, but then came the voices. "Don't give up," one pilot shouted over comms. "They're counting on us down." "There. For the colony," another cried. And then Harper's voice. "For Earth." The words carried through every ship. Grief turned into fury. Fear turned into determination. Love for home, for each other, for the colony below. They became weapons sharper than steel. The fleet rallied. Ships swung back into formation, striking with deadly precision. Their emotions didn't break them. They bound them together. On the bridge of the Resolute, Elias watched the impossible unfold. His people fought harder with every loss. A destroyed ship did not weaken them, it fueled them. Every life taken gave them reason to fight fiercer, faster, stronger. The enemy raiders began to falter. Their formations broke. Their commanders hesitated, unprepared for this kind of resistance. "They don't understand," Elias murmured. "They've never fought anyone who bleeds and rises stronger." The Resolute tore through another raider, its guns blazing, its crew shouting in triumph. Across the fleet, voices roared over comms, angry, grieving, determined. It wasn't just battle, it was a storm, and the enemy was caught in it. On one of the alien ships, a commander shouted in panic, his voice captured on intercepted comms. "They fight like they're already dead. They fight with heart." Elias allowed himself a thin smile. The galaxy would learn today. The flames of battle spread wider. Human ships moved like hunters, coordinated not just by orders but by something deeper, the bond of emotion. They fought for each other. They fought for the colony. They fought because they cared. By the time the last raider fell, exploding into burning shards, the void was silent except for the faint crackle of damaged comms. The human fleet floated victorious, battered but alive. On the surface, the colony sent up desperate signals of thanks. Civilians cheered from bunkers as the enemy fled. Elias stood tall on the bridge, his uniform torn, his hands steady. He looked out at the stars, knowing the council would hear of this. "They thought emotions made us weak," he said quietly, almost to himself. "But emotions just made us unstoppable. And somewhere, deep in the galaxy, those who mocked humanity would feel the first spark of fear." The power of grief. The human fleet floated above the burning colony, scarred but victorious. Fires raged across the surface below, but the people still, alive, waved their signals of hope. Against impossible odds, the raiders had been defeated. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Elias Ward stood tall, but his chest felt heavy. The crew around him cheered, voices full of relief and pride. Yet Elias's eyes stayed fixed on the tactical screen, where one human ship was marked in black. Gone. The Vanguard. It had been destroyed during the fight. 50 lives lost. Silence fell over the bridge when the report came in. Harper's voice trembled as he read the casualty list. The names echoed like stones dropping into water. Daniel Brooks, Aya Collins, Chief Engineer Reddick. 50 names, 50 hearts. The crew lowered their heads. Some clenched their fists, others wiped their eyes. The victory felt sharp, but the grief cut deeper. For a moment, doubt crept in. The council's words returned, mocking whispers in Elias's mind. Humans are too emotional, fragile flames, easy to snuff out. He looked around the bridge. His crew was broken, tears in their eyes, shoulders shaking. The grief was real, heavy, crushing. And yet, he saw something else. None of them left their posts. None turned away. Their grief did not weaken them. It hardened them. Every tear was fire. Every name lost became fuel. Elias stepped forward, his voice steady but strong. "Listen to me," he said. "Yes, we lost them, 50 souls, but hear me now. If they were here, they would not want us to retreat. They would want us to stand, to rise, to fight harder than ever before." His voice carried through the comms to every ship in the fleet. Soldiers, pilots, and officers across the formation listened, their faces lit by the glow of burning screens. "They think emotions make us weak," Elias continued. "But grief does not break us, it drives us. Anger does not blind us, it sharpens us. Love does not distract us, it unites us. Every loss we take will only make us fight harder. That is what it means to be human." A murmur spread across the fleet. Then voices answered over the comms. "For the Vanguard," one shouted. "For our brothers and sisters," another cried. "For Earth." Dozens of voices roared together. The grief had turned into rage, not wild, chaotic rage, but focused, burning determination. And just in time. The sensors lit up. Harper's face went pale. "Captain, new enemy contacts. A second wave. Twice as many ships." The crew tensed. The colony survivors screamed, through broken comms begging for protection. Elias clenched his fists. This was it. The real test. "Form up," he ordered. "Every ship, every gun. They think our grief makes us weaker. Show them it makes us unstoppable. The enemy fleet appeared on the edge of the void, black ships bristling with weapons. Their commanders had clearly underestimated the humans, sending more forces to crush what they believed were fragile survivors. The battle began with a storm of fire. The second wave was fiercer, more disciplined. Human shields buckled under the heavy barrage. Sparks flew across the Resolute's bridge as systems strained, but this time the human fleet did not falter. They fought with the names of the fallen burning in their hearts. Every loss became a reason to push harder. Every explosion reminded them of the vanguard. Every strike was vengeance wrapped in fire. The Resolute dived through enemy formations, guns blazing. The Defiance swooped in behind, covering its flank with precise shots. Fighters darted like hornets, reckless but fearless, driven by grief that had turned into courage. On the alien ships, commanders shouted in confusion. Why aren't they breaking? Why are they fighting harder after losing so much? Elias's voice cut through the human comms. Because we don't run from loss. We rise from it. The words spread like lightning. Pilots screamed battle cries, officers pushed their ships beyond their limits, engineers patched systems with bare hands. And slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. Human ships tore through, the second wave with brutal precision. They were outnumbered, but every strike was fueled by heart. The enemy formations broke. One by one, alien ships fell to fire. At last, the survivors fled, retreating into the void. The second wave was shattered. The human fleet hung battered, burning, but alive. Cheers erupted across the comms, mixed with sobs of grief and joy. Under the bridge of the Resolute, Elias finally allowed himself a breath. He looked at his crew, faces streaked with sweat and tears, but eyes burning with fire. They called us weak because we feel, he said softly. But today, our grief turned into strength, and that strength saved lives. No one laughed at humans now, and somewhere in the darkness the galaxy began to whisper, not about human weakness, but about human fire. The enemy crumbles, the second wave had fallen, and the battlefield was silent again. Broken raiders drifted through the void, their hulls glowing red as fire consumed them. The human fleet, though battered and scarred, still stood together. Their ships were smoking, shields cracked, but their hearts burned brighter than ever. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Elias Ward sat forward in his chair, his hands gripping the edges tightly. Around him, officers worked with steady urgency. Harper wiped blood from a cut across his forehead as he called out, "Enemy signals retreating, Captain." "We did it." The crew cheered, but Elias did not smile. His eyes were fixed on the tactical screen. "No," he said quietly. "It's not over. They'll be back. And when they come, they'll bring everything." He was right. Within the hour, new signals lit up the scanners. This time it wasn't just raiders. A full enemy fleet emerged from the void, massive warships leading the charge. Their engines burned like suns, their weapons glowing with lethal energy. The aliens had finally taken the humans seriously. Gasps rippled across the bridge. Harper's face paled. "Captain, they're sending an armada." Elias rose to his feet, his voice steady. "Then this is where we stand." The comms crackled to life as the enemy commander broadcast his voice across the void. It was deep, cold, filled with arrogance. "Humans, you fight with desperation, with grief and anger. But feelings cannot save you. You are fragile, and now we will end you." The crew bristled, anger flashing in their eyes. Elias stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. He activated the comm and spoke so the enemy could hear. "You say our emotions make us weak, but look around you. Every ship we lost made us fight harder. Every name we mourned gave us strength. You don't understand us, and that's why you'll lose." The alien commander laughed, a harsh sound that echoed across space. "We will crush you." "Try," Elias said. The battle erupted. Enemy warships unleashed waves of fire, beams slicing through the dark. Human shields flared and cracked. Fighters screamed across the battlefield, diving into impossible maneuvers. The void was filled with explosions, a storm of light and death. At first, the humans were overwhelmed. Ships shook under heavy fire, systems failing. One corvette spun out of formation, its engines dying. But before despair could spread, a voice came across comms, a young pilot, her tone fierce and raw. "For the vanguard," she cried. "For the fallen," another shouted. The words spread like wildfire. Every ship repeated them, voices overlapping, rising into a roar that carried across the fleet. The grief from their losses, the love for their people, the anger at their enemy. It became their strength once more. The fleet rallied. The Resolute led the charge, guns blazing. The Defiance covered its flank, tearing into enemy fighters. Human ships moved as one, not with cold logic but with burning passion. They fought like every death mattered, like every life was worth the entire galaxy. And the enemy crumbled. Their massive warships faltered under the relentless strikes. Their commanders shouted in confusion. Why don't they break? Why do they fight harder with every loss? Because they didn't understand. Aliens saw emotion as chains. Humans wore them as armor. Every tear, every scream, every memory of the fallen became a weapon sharper than steel. The enemy flagship took a direct hit from a coordinated strike. 3 human ships diving in perfect formation, sacrificing their safety to shatter its core. The explosion lit the void like a second sun. The alien fleet broke. Warships turned, engines flaring, retreating into the darkness. The humans had done the impossible. Silence fell again, broken only by the crackle of comms and the sound of cheers, mixed with sobs of relief. On the bridge of the Resolute, Harper laughed breathlessly. "They're running, Captain. They're actually running from us." Elias stood tall, his face steady but his eyes burning. "They mocked us. They thought emotions made us weak. But emotions made us unstoppable. That's why they fear us now." The crew erupted in cheers, but Elias raised his hand. His voice was calm, but it cut deep. "This victory is not the end. It is the beginning. The Council will hear of this, the galaxy will hear of this, and when they speak of humans, they will no longer call us weak. They will remember what we did here, and they will never forget." Outside the windows, the colony, below flickered with faint light as survivors waved their signals of hope. For them, humanity had stood. For them, emotions had burned brighter than weapons. The enemy had crumbled, and humanity had risen. The Council confronted. The human fleet returned to the great station days later, battered but alive. Their ships carried scars, burned hulls, cracked shields, broken plating, but they also carried victory. Against impossible odds, they had driven back not 1 but 3 waves of attackers. Word of the battle had already spread. Whispers reached every corner of the galaxy. The humans had fought with fire that no alien could explain. When Captain Elias, Ward stepped into the Galactic Council chamber, the laughter that had once filled it was gone. The great hall was silent. Alien leaders sat tall in their curved seats, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Where once there had been smirks and mocking voices, now there was tension. Fear, even. Elias walked calmly, his boots echoing against the polished floor. He carried no weapon, only the weight of truth. His uniform was torn at the shoulder, his face lined with exhaustion, but he stood taller than ever. Behind him, his officers marched in silent unity, their eyes fierce, their posture unbroken. At the center, the Council's leader rose. His horns gleamed under the chamber lights, his voice deep and sharp. "Captain Elias Ward of Earth," he said, "you return alive. Against all reason, your fleet survived." A ripple of murmurs spread. Some alien leaders leaned closer, studying him. Others looked uneasy, their hands shifting nervously on the edges of their thrones. Elias's gaze swept across the chamber. He remembered the last time he stood here, the cruel laughter, the mocking words, the dismissal of his people. He remembered whispering to himself that they would one day see what emotions could do. Now they would. "You said humans are too emotional," Elias began. His voice was steady, but it carried through the vast chamber like thunder. You said grief makes us fragile, that anger blinds us, that love weakens us. You called us fragile flames, easy to snuff out. A few counselors shifted uncomfortably. Others frowned, their expressions cold. But when the colony called for help, Elias continued, who came? When the enemy's fleets descended, who stood? Not you, not your logic, not your endless debates. You sat in this chamber while people burned. He stepped forward, his voice rising. It was our grief that drove us to fight harder. It was our anger that sharpened our aim. It was our love, for our homes, for our families, for each other, that kept us standing when the enemy thought we would break. Harper, standing behind him, clenched his fist and raised it slightly in silent agreement. Other officers nodded, their faces glowing with pride. The chamber buzzed with whispers, some harsh, some uneasy. One alien counselor hissed, emotions are dangerous. They make you reckless. Elias turned his gaze on him. Reckless? He leaned forward, his eyes blazing. Reckless is letting people die because you were too afraid to feel. Reckless is mocking the fire that gives us strength. We are human. We bleed, we cry, we rage, we love, and that is why we are unstoppable. The word struck like a blade. The chamber went silent again. The council leader narrowed his eyes. You believe emotions are your weapon? Elias did not hesitate. They are more than weapons, they are our core. They are what makes us human, and if you fear them... His voice dropped, heavy with finality. Then you should fear us. A long silence followed. The alien leaders looked at one another, uneasy, shifting in their seats. For the first time they had no laughter, no mockery, only silence. Finally the council leader spoke, his tone quieter than before. Perhaps we judged too quickly. It wasn't an apology, but Elias didn't need one. He had already won. The galaxy had already seen. He stepped back, his officers following. As he left the chamber, whispers rose behind him, not of mockery but of fear, respect, and something else entirely. Hope. In the corridors outside, Harper walked beside him, his face still burning with adrenaline. Captain, they looked afraid of you. Elias gave a small, tired smile. Good. Let them be afraid. Let them see us not as fragile flames but as fire itself. He paused, looking out through the glass walls at the endless stars. Somewhere out there, enemies were already regrouping. Somewhere out there, more battles waited. But never forget, he said softly, almost to himself. Our strength doesn't come from weapons. It comes from what we feel, from who we are. That's what will carry us through the dark. The crew behind him stood taller at his words. For the first time they knew the galaxy no longer saw them as weak. Humanity had spoken, and the galaxy was listening. Unstoppable humanity. The council chamber had fallen silent, but the echoes of Elias Ward's words spread far beyond its walls. Across the galaxy, whispers carried through markets, stations, and fleets. Some called the humans reckless, others called them dangerous. But no one dared call them weak anymore. On the Resolute, Elias stood by the wide glass window of the command deck. The stars glittered in the void, cold and endless, but to him they felt different now. They no longer seemed like distant eyes judging humanity. They felt like paths, roads waiting to be walked. Behind him, Harper entered quietly. The lieutenant's face still carried bruises from battle, but his eyes burned with fire. Captain, he said softly, word has spread. The council, they won't mock us again, not after what you said. Elias turned slightly, his expression calm but fierce. It isn't about me, Harper. It's about all of us. Every ship that fought, every life we lost, every tear, every shout, every ounce of grief that turned into strength. That's what they saw. That's what they fear. Harper nodded, his voice steady. They called emotions weakness. But emotions are why we're still standing. Elias looked back out at the stars. and why we always will. The days that followed became a turning point. Messages flooded in from colonies that had once doubted Earth's place in the galaxy. Some sent thanks. Others sent pleas for help. Even a few alien factions, once cold and dismissive, now spoke with cautious respect. Reports whispered of enemy, fleets retreating at the mere sight of human banners. Pirates abandoned raids when they heard humans were near. Fear traveled faster than ships, and humanity's fire had lit the stars. But not everyone welcomed the change. Some council members plotted in secret, worried that humans would rise too quickly. Yet even their doubts carried a new tone. Not laughter, but caution. For humanity had shown something no species could ignore. Emotions, once mocked as weakness, were now known as humanity's most terrifying strength. One evening, Elias gathered his crew in the mess hall of the Resolute. The room was crowded, filled with tired faces, scarred uniforms, and eyes that carried both grief and pride. He stood at the center, raising his voice so all could hear. They said our emotions make us fragile, but you, every one of you, proved them wrong. You turned grief into courage. You turned anger into strength. You turned love into unity. And because of that, we stood when no one else would. We saved lives when no one else cared. The room erupted in cheers, voices echoing against the steel walls. Some pounded their fists on tables, others shouted names of the fallen with pride. The sound wasn't just noise. It was a declaration, a promise. Elias lifted his hand, and the room grew quiet again. His voice dropped, steady and sharp. Remember this. Emotions are not our chains. They are our wings. They are the reason we fight, the reason we rise. And as long as we hold on to them, no force in this galaxy can stop us. For a moment the silence was heavy, filled with raw power. Then the crew cheered again, louder than before, their voices shaking the walls. Later, when the hall had quieted and the crew returned to their duties, Elias walked alone back to the command deck. He paused at the glass window again, staring out into the void. The stars shone bright, countless and eternal. He remembered that first day in the council chamber, the laughter, the mockery, the dismissive words. Fragile flames, too emotional, weak. And he remembered his whisper. They'll see what emotions can do. Now they had. A soft smile tugged at his lips. He leaned forward slightly, whispering into the vast silence of space, words meant for no one and everyone. They wanted to see weakness. We showed them what makes us human. His reflection stared back at him, not of a man broken by ridicule, but of a leader who had carried the fire of his people into the stars. Behind him, the Resolute's engines hummed steadily, ready for the journeys ahead. Around him, his crew moved with pride and purpose, and before him the galaxy waited, no longer laughing but listening. Humanity had been mocked. Humanity had been doubted. Humanity had been underestimated. But now humanity was unstoppable, and the stars themselves would remember.